Hello again. So this is like literally like the fifth or sixth time I've been recording this video, and my microphone's already way too close to me again. Oh my god, I'm making all the mistakes. This has been one painful recording session, so if I don't sound like I'm motivated, I don't sound into it, I apologise. That's why. We've had all sorts of issues trying to record this. We've had sound corrupting and stuff, so hopefully we can get into it anyway. So today we're going to be talking about Korean drafting, specifically D Plus versus T1 in their first playoff series of the summer split. So in game one, we had D Plus open with 3 jungle bans and T1 responding with essentially 3 mid bans. But both sides eliminate 3 power picks, which is always a nice start to the draft because that's sort of what you're aiming to do, or in current consensus, that's what you're aiming to do anyway. And as D Plus, where blue side, they get the ultimate pick of the power picks left over. They choose the Sejuani, which gives T1 counter pick in the jungle. For some point in the draft. T1 then effectively utilise red side, because on red side you can either choose to immediately respond, or you can save that response for something like your third pick and lock in 2 extra power picks. T1 lock in 2 power picks, which denies their opponents those power picks themselves, and guarantees themselves their personal favoured side of the Xayah Kai'Sa matchup, and lock in a strong flex pick in the Jace. Admittedly, they do tend to play Jace in mid only. I found the response of D Plus to be a little interesting as they looked in the Kai'Sa Rakan. The reason this is interesting is because obviously they just instantly take the opposite side of the Kai'Sa Xayah matchup. Why not? It's already there. And they also pick away the Rakan, who would be normally paired alongside the Xayah, and delay their Jace counter, knowing that they get to counter T1's 4 pick anyway because of the order pick and ban. In the ban phase, T1 then banned Yone and Jax for the sake of a more favourable matchup, mostly for their... Well, I guess it's technically the Jace and the other solo laner that they eventually bring in. Whilst DK responded by banning the Rella and Gnar. The Gnar was like a positive sign for me at least, because it told me that D Plus had learned from earlier that the Jace tends to be played mid even when it's not Poppy playing. Whereas like they had shown that they didn't really do that research on teams in previous series. So T1 then locked in the Aatrox. Normally I'd recommend that you delay the Aatrox, as D Plus have already shown what they're picking in the support. So then the Aatrox is like a counter pick rather than sitting here, where it could be where you might want to flex your Jace top for whatever reason, and leave the Alistar for counter. You've already got the Alistar counter pick anyway. But it worked. The Azir got a good matchup. Not the Azir. The Jace got a good matchup. The Aatrox got a good matchup and did well and performed in the game. And the Azir counterpick into the Jace isn't a big deal. Renekton, again, isn't a big deal. Anyway, so then the Alistar final pick actually worked really well in the game. As a whole, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an amazingly special final pick, but I do kind of like it as a pick in this situation. Like, if that was your final pick, it's a perfectly good one. And in this game, the poke for both teams is really important. And the flanks that teams can get off, especially with those flanks revolving around their top laners, are really important. So the role that the supports play in either aiding the flank directly by going with the top laner, or by just soaking pressure or creating pressure elsewhere on the map so that the top laner sort of gets ignored a little bit so that they can go and do their flank, is really, really important. The other thing that's quite important for this game is like whether ADCs can get chunked out earlier in the fight, before the actual main fight starts, so that a team's forced to back off to allow their ADC to come back into the game after backing and regaining all that health. Personally, that's the reason why I prefer Kai'Sa over the Xayah, especially in poke comps. I do generally prefer Kai'Sa over Xayah, but I think that's a little bit of bias on my part from not really liking the Xayah in general. Yeah, so if you were going to go and rewatch the games, those are definitely things to keep an eye out for. In game 2, DK matched, well, the whole first half of the draft was matched, and T1 even matched their second round of bans. But what was worth noticing is Maokai was likely to be picked by T1 no matter what jungle bans you picked. So D Plus essentially wasted their first 3 bans through game 1 and game 2, which is a little bit tragic, but I think it's alright. The big change in this game was the picking up of the Alistar ban. Sorry, the picking up of the Alistar ban from D+. Normally when you mirror any part of a draft, it's normally because you've spotted a small issue with your previous draft and you know how to fix it, or you don't see a reason to change it because you think it went well enough in the last game. The small change of the Alistar isn't normally a net draft improvement. Outside of the series, it's not a big deal. The Gnar ban was perfectly valid in the first game. The Alistar ban here is perfectly valid as well in any normal game. But because of how effective the Alistar was on T1 in the previous game, it makes perfect sense. It got player of the game. It was definitely the most impactful champ in the previous game. So yeah, it definitely makes sense. This somehow also forced Zeus off of the Aatrox and onto the Renekton. I assume this is because of how effective the roam support of Alistar was and is in general, and how much he can soak up versus the Renekton, who sort of wants... Aatrox sort of wants an extended fight which he can heal in, whereas Renekton sort of wants a much faster fight where he can just queue in, kill someone, get out, essentially, almost. It's not quite that simple, but that's like a very much simplified version of it. And then on the other side, they were able to get Dplus were able to get a better matchup because K'Sante into Renekton's a much better matchup than Renekton into Aatrox for these two teams, not in general, in my opinion, for these two teams. And so it was a bit of a better draft for Dplus. Similar sort of idea, they're both going for poke. In this game, Dplus were effectively able to use the Kai'Sa into the Xayah matchup because they were able to get that poke onto Gumayusi early, constantly getting him caught out early and getting him chunked before teamfights could actually manifest, and that meant that Dplus just had a significant advantage at a lot of neutral objectives, which eventually got them the win. Also, please, for the love of God, do not let Keria play Braum. He's not a Braum player. He tries to play like an engaged Braum, and it makes no sense, and it looks stupid, and as a support player, it hurts my brain, hurts my eyes, hurts everything. So yeah, that was game 2. It was definitely a fun game. Game 3 was another sort of interesting game. So T1 finally got blue side, the only blue side game they got of this series. And T1 made one change in terms of their bans. Or one important change in terms of their bans. And that was the Seju ban. Which is fair, because even though Damwon don't really draft well around the Sejuani, it's definitely like an effective pick in this series. And it's been working out for Canyon in the series. And he's looked good on it. Dplus also then picked up the Kai'Sa ban, which I just don't get because T1 had obviously been prioritizing the Xayah over the Kai'Sa throughout the entire series so far, and you just looked so good on it and it just been so effective for you. So I don't really see why you'd even believe that T1 would want to pick it up as their first pick, so you should always be getting it anyway. It just doesn't really make sense, and obviously, as you can see, T1 went with the Xayah first pick anyway. So Dplus then responded with the Rakan and Azir, locking in their mid-support Joe, so not a response at all to the Xayah. And T1 responded with Maokai and Aatrox. Theoretically, there's like no real link between these picks at this point. Maokai can technically be flexed to support, but T1 often play him jungle, so there's no reason to believe that would change at this point in the draft. And then Dplus respond with Rao, which is a little bit weird as its strength lies entirely, in my opinion, at this stage of the draft, it lies in its flex potential. But as you've already locked in your Rakan, normally I would personally want to delay it till later in the draft so it's got at least some level of surprise, because I feel like she's quite ineffective when she's not vaguely surprising. And then in terms of the final bans, T1 then limited Death's Pool, taking out the Zeri and Sivir, whilst Dplus didn't want to see Keria back on the Alistar and then ban the Xerath away from Faker, which is useful because Faker was definitely looking to get more comfort as the matchup went on. He'd definitely been losing out to Azir a lot in the early game, in the early learning phases, and so that makes sense. And then Poppy is picked up, which is a strong jungler, and she could be switched to support if you wanted that over the Maokai. Personally, I do prefer her over the jungle, because there's not really much difference between the two, but Maokai tends to give you a bit more versatility in the bot lane, whereas Poppy's quite one-dimensional in the bot lane. So, like, if you're going to have them either way, I personally prefer Poppy in jungle, but I think it's all down to player preferences, really. Also, the pickup of the Poppy nerfs Dplus's picks of Rakan, K'Sante, and even Azir, and potentially nerfs any pickup if Deft opted into Kalista or a Samira. Kalista more likely as it fits into the team comp and he plays it more often, but he ends up locking in the Varus. The Corki is also an interesting rotation out of T1, as it sort of means Faker is opting into that comfort pick, as I mentioned earlier, and he's not really looking to play meta anymore. He's looking for comfort within that matchup so he can have a better time. T1 in this game, Dplus's comp is essentially 3 dive champions with the poke of Varus and Azir, and there's like no link really there. There's like quite a big disconnect. And T1, in contrast, have a very strong front line with the healing of Aatrox and the tankiness of Maokai and Poppy, which could neuter the poke of Dplus in the form of Varus and Nizir. And also, the front-to-back potential of the Corki and Xayah is very effective. And Xayah is one of the strongest ADCs into dive comps, which 3 of the players on Dplus are, because of her ease of escape that she has with her ult. Unfortunately for this draft, Dplus got 3 early kills, mostly because of T1's lack of coordination, especially for the second kill, where Kerry was being way too impatient, didn't even allow Owen to start channeling his Hextech Flash, and got himself killed like an idiot. And then at 11 minutes, they executed a horrible dive as well, which was really painful. You'll see my reaction to this game later. I've got screenshots of me reacting to it. It was painful. It was very painful. But eventually, Dplus's weak draft came back and bit them in the ass, as T1 came back and won from a massive deficit, which made me feel really validated, because it meant the draft actually mattered for once. And then we got on to Game 4. And in Game 4, the bans from Game 1 and 2, as well as the first 2 picks in the draft, were the same. But T1 picked themselves up a Rakan, whilst Dplus... sorry. Yeah, no, sorry, I'm getting confused. I was looking at the Game 3 draft. That's my bad. Whilst Dplus responded with Aphelios Lulu, which is a nice lane matchup, but it doesn't necessarily fit with the Sejuani that they picked earlier. T1 then pick up the Aphelios... sorry, my brain is gone. It's gone. I've been saying this too much today. T1 then picked up the Aatrox, and then banned the Jax Nazir, which has been a, sorry, I was late as well. Which has been a bully. It has been an absolute bully to Faker in lane, so it's worth banning when they eventually did get around to doing it, securing them their final game, really. Dplus respond with a Maokai and Ahri ban, and T1 picked up the Rail to continue their dive comp. But it was at this point that I realised there was no Kai'Sa presence at this point in the series, in this draft, which I think is a bit of an L, because it actually works far better with the rest of T1's comp than the Xayah, and probably would have done slightly better in lane against the Aphelios Lulu. Don't count me on that. My knowledge of ADC's survivability in this situation is a bit balked based on the ADCs that I like playing. I'm quite a big advocate of the Ezreal Kai'Sa, so maybe I'm a bit delusional there. As I said earlier, I'm a bit biased against the Xayah. But yeah, Dplus then responded with a Jace Cassante to continue a sort of a no-theme comp, really. There's an aim of poke, but it's weird because they have a lack of sustain themselves. But they do have the range advantage, which is always useful. T1 picked up the Annie, so they kept continuing their engage comp as well. All but Gumigo basically had a ton of engage. And then Canyon, he's a good Seju, as you can see here, but they never build around him playing the Sejuani, and so it's just really tragic watching him play. The bot lane advantage for Dplus in this game was absolutely critical. If Dplus were going to get the lead and potentially win the game, they had to completely rely on what advantages they could get in the bot lane, and they got them early. They did their job early on, but then it just sort of fell away as the game went on. That advantage that they should have had got absolutely nerfed. The enchant into an engage support just didn't work out in the end. Not because of that, but because they couldn't sustain the advantage that they got in lane. So then we'll talk about me failing mentally during the game, and me failing mentally during the video. Oh my god. Anyway, so I first commented that T1 were trying to send me to an early grave, and then I was like, you see this death here. This is meant to be a Drake fight, and you can see that Zeus is all the way up here. The rest of his team is somewhere off down here, the other side of the choke. And he's just completely isolated himself in a 4v1 after losing Carrier. And he goes down very, very quickly. And then I basically insulted T1's players quite a bit. Talked about getting a truck, hiring a truck. The fact that if we let literal monkeys smash their keyboards and take a shit on their monitor whilst playing these comps, T1's monkeys would win 99 out of 100 times because their draft is that much better. And that the only reason they would lose that one time is because they started throwing poo into the stands. And then we got some NA slander in there. So yeah, this game has taken its toll on me. This video has taken its toll on me. Hopefully I'll be in a better state for the next one, which will either be me introducing LPL teams, it will be or talking about blue side versus red side, because I do think I need to weigh in on that debate, because I think the league has got too much unity on a decision that I don't think is correct. And then maybe a video on adaptability, or like differences in strategies coming in at some point. And then some reaction stuff to live events as well coming in, as well as the league weekly update eventually. So yeah, see you for that. Hopefully I'll be more mentally stable for all those videos.